Welcome to a brief history conspiracy.
This week, 9/11, follow the money.
So if you are new to our channel, please like, subscribe, hit that bell notification, leave a comment. It really does help us out.
Thanks.
Right, so we're now looking at the money. I think we've mentioned this in a load of episodes, but I think up till now we've talked about the hows and the what happened. We're now going to start getting into the why.
Yeah, because really, I think what happened in terms of the physical events on 9/11 was a massive distraction from following the money.
Yeah. Well, and we'll start off with the Commission report, who said that this entire episode is a waste of time because following the money was a waste of time.
What was it? I think the exact quote from the Commission report was something like, the financing of the 9/11 attacks is of little or no consequence.
Even when they were presented a load of evidence about the very unusual stock market activity, which we'll discuss in a little while,
yes,
they actually said that was also not of relevance. There was no relevance in investigating the stock market activity. So, following the money. We've already talked about Mr. Silverstein and how he did very well out of the Twin Tower incident.
Yeah.
He tripled the insurance policy when he took over the deal. He couldn't get one company to actually insure the Twin Towers, so he spread it over 25. The other thing he did was there's reports to say he was actually on the phone to his insurance companies on September 12th, arguing that it was two events. It took him less than 24 hours to start thinking about how much money he was going to make out of this deal. That doesn't suggest this man is a very nice person in my mind.
No.
That was his first thought.
Not a very reputable character, is he?
Yeah.
That he was the loss of life, that he was more concerned with his insurance policy.
He was already thinking about how much money. This wasn't one event, this was two events, so I want to be paid out twice, please. And he was. They compromised, but it was still the biggest insurance payout ever, which is pretty impressive. He then sued American Airlines and tried to get a load of money off them as well. But that was even a small part of the amount of money. We're then going to talk about all the missing gold from the Twin Towers.
Yes.
And God knows what else was in those vaults.
Yes, well, yes, what was it? There was a 12-ton truck that got stuck on a fallen ceiling brace in the middle of what looked like to be looting the gold from the vaults underneath the WTC.
There's pictures with all the vault doors just
complex.
Bust open and there's nothing in them. Someone said to me that it was about 200 billion in Chinese gold that they actually robbed.
Okay. Which means they had prior knowledge.
Yeah.
Because they've arranged for somebody to come at a specific time on that day to loot those vaults. So somebody somewhere had prior knowledge.
Right. So if we're going to talk about prior knowledge, simple argument for prior knowledge: if they knew beforehand, then they were in on it. That's simple, right? So Silverstream and Marsh McLennan. Shall we start there?
Well, it's a good place to start, isn't it, really, I suppose? I mean,
so where was Marsh McLennan on the Twin Towers?
I'm not sure exactly, but there were three important...
I can tell you.
Go on.
They were based between floor 93 and 100 on WCC 1.
Yes, okay.
Where did the plane hit WTC 1?
Floor 93?
Between floor 93 and 100 of WTC.
Yes, directly into the secure servers, I believe, of Marsh and McLennan.
So they use this Silverstream software.
So Marsh and McLennan are the biggest insurance broker in the world.
Yeah.
And they're heavily linked to American International Group.
Yeah.
They had a new piece of software called Silverstream software that was supposed to improve the procedural efficiency of day-to-day operations between broking and the insurance company.
There was also
the brokerage.
It was also to do with stock market movements and things as well. And at the end of the day, the faster you can make a sale or the faster you can move information, the more money you make. It's actually worth millions when you start doing it in that you're saving half a penny every transaction, sort of thing, because you're doing it that little bit quicker. It becomes so that's where the Silverstream came from. The idea was to make it fast, and the faster you make it, the more money you make. Silverstream was connected to Marsh McLennan, and they were involved also with Morgan Stanley, Deutsche Bank. Deutsche Bank is a big one on this. That they actually reported a lot of very unusual activity in the morning just before 9/11. And the idea being basically then...
There's people moving money out, isn't it, before something
Well, also
catastrophic
they were
happens that
doing things like making, you know, how you
puts the
get
market
these,
through the floor.
how you can get these big bets on a company that their stock market's going to drop,
Yes.
so their price is going to drop.
Yes, you can put basically a bet on the stock falling. Yes.
There was a lot of bets put on American Airlines the day before. A lot. American Airlines obviously plummeted following 9/11. Their stock price plummeted.
Yeah, of course. That makes sense.
There was also a lot of purchases of Raytheon stock. Raytheon stock that they then released the Tomahawk cruise missile, which was
yes.
very popular following 9/11.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Yeah.
They love a bit of Tomahawk missile. So their stock market following 9/11 actually rose by 37%. So if you owned stock in Raytheon, you did very well. And there was a lot of purchases just before 9/11, the morning of 9/11 in fact. There was millions of pounds, probably billions of pounds worth of transactions.
And you combine that with the hard drives of the computers that were in the wreckage of the WTC 1 and 2 being analysed by an independent company.
Oh, that even get better than that.
Where
that independent company was never supposed to be allowed to do that. They actually went public and said, we've got this new technology and we think we can read the hard drives from 9/11 even with all this damage. And initially, the people clearing up went, no. That's okay.
Okay. I was going to say squeaky bum time, wasn't it, for the people? What? You
and
can
do
what?
Only, basically when they came out publicly and said, no, we can probably save a lot of this data, and then over about 5 to 10 years, they actually, they were able to save significant amounts of data. So this thing about this stock market stuff isn't really a conspiracy theory; it's pretty much fact. And the other thing is, it was worth billions, and even when this evidence was produced to the commission, they said it's not relevant. How is that even possible? You know,
because they're running a cover-up.
Yeah, but they even started to find out where a lot of these,
Simple.
a load of trades on the day was traced back to a Mr. and Mrs. D. Walker, right? But named it doesn't really mean anything. They're related to the Bush family.
I was going to say the Herbert Walker Bush.
Yeah.
A distant. I'm sure I've read about distant cousins on the Walker Bush side. Yeah. So
They
that.
were
Oh, hello.
Never interviewed. Never asked about the transactions they made. They were linked to the Carlyle Group, which we like a lot, and they actually met with the Carlyle Group on September 11th. Bush Senior was present, and so was a Mr. Mansoonajaz. It even admitted being in regular contact with one Mr. Bin Laden.
Well, I assume there were some other members of the Bin Laden family there as well, because supposedly Osama was ostracised from the Bin Laden family for the September the 11th attacks.
Well, I don't know about if any members of the Bin Laden family were at this meeting. Members of the Bin Laden family are members of were members of the Carlyle Group.
No, they're shareholders of the Carlyle Group, yes.
So,
they own a percentage stake in the Carlyle Group.
There was actually an argument to say that there was no connection between terror links and these transactions. They were literally sat in a room in a meeting with a bloke that one said he could get in contact with him Bin Laden whenever you want, and family members. And you're telling me that there's no terror link? That is just, that's just stupid.
Yep, very much agree.
No reason to investigate was the 9/11 Commission's response to that.
You see a theme on September the 11th of complicity through negligence, and then negligence being rewarded and people being promoted for it.
This is just a massive bank job. I mean, seriously.
Yes.
I mean, we're talking billions.
That's exactly what it was. And the destruction of the Twin Towers and the loss of life is a distraction from the money that was stolen.
Yeah.
You're on them. That's exactly what it was.
Right. This would be enough for most people, wouldn't it, to start thinking, okay, we probably need to investigate this. There was stock market transactions in the hours running up to the attack. There was, but you could say that is just, maybe that's bad luck, but I mean, it's pretty bloody unlikely.
To get a really significant surge of activity on a bet on a company failing the day before it has a major catastrophic global event and then falls in its stock prices.
And then the evidence and the records for that are literally in the location where the terror attack hit.
Well, it's either that somebody had some inside knowledge or you believe in premonition. It's one of the two. It can't be anything else.
We're a conspiracy website. We do believe in premonition, don't we? Have we discussed that yet? I'm not sure.
I don't think we have actually. Premonition. But
Majestic 12, here we go.
I'm far more But even if there was somebody that could do that and could tell the future,
remote viewed it.
Yeah, it remote viewed it. Yeah, so right, there'd be one person or a handful of people that would have put these bets on.
Yeah, it was significant.
Not people that are related to the current president, who happens to be in cahoots with the family of the guy that supposedly perpetrated these attacks, with the oil company that they own between them.
Yeah, exactly. Now, there was also a lot of activity that then went back to Saudi Arabia and Saudi Arabian royal family and things like this. And now, but you could actually, it's not actually a massive leap to say that they were in on this. Because even though we invaded Iraq and Afghanistan, there was one Iraqi in the terrorists? I'm going to have to forget now. There weren't many, was there? They were mostly Saudis.
I think there was quite a few,
And Afghanistan, funded through Afghanistan. We should have invaded Afghanistan and Saudi Arabia, really. If this was we're going to talk about this in another episode. But,
I don't know, it depends really, doesn't it? I mean, he was sheltered in Pakistan, so you could argue that we could have invaded Pakistan.
So Pakistan, we should have invaded Pakistan and not Afghanistan. I think maybe we just missed. Because Bush was not the cleverest man in the world. Maybe he was told, Pakistan are in on this, they've planned it, and then by the end of the meeting they were planned to invade Afghanistan, just because they sort of misheard or something. Maybe that would make more sense than... It makes more sense than why they invaded Afghanistan, to be honest.
But Afghanistan, heroin. There's a one-word answer for that.
We'll come back to that. So,
heroin production went up 1,000% in the first year of US occupation.
And heroin's worth $9.3 billion a year?
No, $398 billion a year. And America didn't have his finger in that pie. Yeah. So guess what? It wanted a finger in that pie. It's got a finger in that pie now.
It's got his whole hand in it.
I was going to say.
It's American pie in that pie.
It's American brand heroin now.
Right, so the insider trading's bad enough. We're then going to start talking about $2.3 trillion.
Oh, yes, yes. The $2.3 trillion hole that Donald Rumsfeld announced in a congressional hearing on September the 10th, 2001 that was missing from the Pentagon Department of Defense budget.
Now, you see this in a lot of conspiracy websites, and they say he announced it on that day. It's not quite true.
No, okay.
He'd been talking about it since January and April, but this is when it got to the point of actually being the congressional hearing on it.
Quite a coincidence, though, that the day before the attack occurred, where they destroyed all of the places where they kept logs of where they could possibly track where that 2.3 trillion went, that they decide to announce it the day before, and that they're going to look into it really heavily.
It gets better than that. Rumsfeld was only really talking about this because he was planning to spend $50 billion. He was really pushing to spend $50 billion on a US Army modernisation programme.
Okay.
Which is linked to something we'll talk about in a minute called the New American Century white paper.
Oh, right, that lovely document.
We'll come back to that.
The PNAC document.
Yeah. So he wanted to push his $50 billion, but Congress was saying, how dare you try to push $50 billion's worth of spending when you don't know what you spent the last $2.3 trillion on? Now, we've got a bit of a disagreement about this. The $2.3 trillion, I don't think, was technically missing. But you do. I think the $2.3 trillion was technically just... It was like they were spending their money on the groceries, but they weren't paying attention what they were spending it on. They weren't recording it very well. So, and they'd been doing it years. Because you remember the defence budget this is actually about 8 years worth of defence budget that they'd lost. They didn't know what they'd spent it on. Nobody was bothering writing it down. What was it you said earlier? It's more like going out on the beer.
It's more like going out on the piss with a wallet full of cash and coming back with no cash and going,
well, what do I spend it on?
What do I spend it on?
Yeah.
Where
do they get this hickey?
Right, it's not really like that. It's not really like that so much. And it's just semantics, unaccounted for, missing. It's the same thing.
It's complete incompetence. And if this wasn't anything but the government, if this was anything but the Pentagon that had done this, they'd all be in prison.
Yes, there'd be serious financial investigations going on by the various governmental departments involved in investigating those financial fraudulent transactions.
But $2.3 trillion, though, which is $8,000 for every American taxpayer, don't forget. At least, though, after this incident and after all this happened, they did fix the problem, though, didn't they? No, they didn't. No, they didn't even a bit. It's much.
Now every American citizen owes about $80,000 because it's now about $20 trillion.
2011 it was $8 trillion. by now it's somewhere in the 22 trillion.
It's above 20. The estimates are suggesting.
Yeah, but this is the point for me. They're estimates because they don't actually know.
They have no records
because
of
they
where they
don't know
spent
where
it.
the money went. It's like, how can you do that? If I paid all my weekly bills and then my wife went, oh, how much was the electric? And I went, oh, that money isn't missing. It's gone somewhere. I just don't know where. My wife would kill me. So, on 9/11, this investigation was hampered slightly. In the Pentagon, which is the episode we just did, if you go back and have a look at that, the aircraft hit Wedge 1.
Yes.
And it struck the...
Accounts and bookkeeping section of the Pentagon, which was the section of the Pentagon responsible for looking into the 2.3 trillion hole in their budget.
Yeah. This team, the building had just been, that section of the building had just been renovated, and they'd only just moved back in. If this attack had happened, I think it's about 8 weeks earlier, nobody would have died because nobody would have been there. There maybe the painter would have
Or
died.
if it had happened
Bloke painting the
eight
walls.
weeks afterwards, it probably would have killed
Probably
three times more than they were killed because it would have been fully staffed.
It just took out the people basically doing this investigation. Now, they argue afterwards that it didn't really stop the investigation, but it definitely hampered it. If you actually look into what they're saying, though, what it basically did was actually made looking into 1.2 trillion completely impossible.
Yep.
Because the records for that were completely gone, and they've kind of been able to piece other things together.
The other 1.1 trillion together, kind of, ish. They get it down to about 600,000, supposedly, at one point, but half of it was pretty dodgy.
Yeah, well, they got it down to about 600 billion.
Oh, sorry, 600,000, not 600,000,
Yeah, they got it down to 600,000. They wouldn't even...
Blimey.
They'd
be very happy with that.
That's like the cost of a hammer, isn't it? That's what these people
that's what they invoice for a hammer, anyway.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, they got it down to about 600 billion, but then somebody else came in and investigated and went, where'd you get those numbers from? And they went, we don't know. we just found them. So the number went straight back up again to a lot, and they basically fudged or faked a load of documents. That's the thing is they faked a load of documents. They don't. It just amazes me that they can spend money on this on the defence budget and have no idea what they're spent on.
You'd think also the American public would be in uproar at the amount of their taxpayers' dollars that were just disappearing into something that can't be explained.
They don't seem to care.
I just can't understand how they don't want to know.
So, after September 11th, they hired a new Undersecretary of Defence. And his main job was to find this 2.3 trillion and to figure out what it, and hopefully to stop it ever happening again.
Well, since they destroyed the accounts and bookkeeping section of the Pentagon, though, they did have a backup.
Yeah.
And the backup was located in WTC 7 of the World Trade Center complex, which collapsed on September the 11th.
Oh no, it wasn't fine. It collapsed. Didn't it?
Okay. But didn't get hit by a plane.
Yeah. I thought it was fine. It didn't. It fell down. Really,
so they
really
destroyed the part of the Pentagon that had the original, and then they destroyed the part of the World Trade Center complex that had the backup.
Yeah.
So they really couldn't find most of this 2.3 trillion.
But like I say, I think it was like
or find where it
1.2
was
trillion.
spent,
Even they admitted we don't know. We can't do anything with 1.2, and then they fudged another 2 trillion, and then that all went out. But like I said, we said this is a problem that's still going on. It's now 20 trillion. You should really be asking your senator where this money is going, because it's going somewhere. Just to put into thing of how much 2.3 trillion is, our entire debt as a country right now today is only around £1 trillion. So that would be $1.8 trillion. The deficit in America right now is about $1 trillion. This would your debt
Didn't the American deficit at some point get up to about 15 trillion though?
Not the debt did, but the deficit. So how much money they actually don't spend. So the difference between how much money they earn and how much money they spend.
Yes.
Ours is about $1 billion. America's is, well, ours was about $1 billion. It's much lower than that now. But America's is about $1 trillion, and the national debt is, I believe it's somewhere about in the 20 trillion
I'm getting
area.
confused. The national debt in America at one point was 15.
I think it's higher
trillion,
than that now.
But now it's higher than that, I think. Yeah.
If they knew where this money was, in theory, if this money was sat somewhere. I don't think it is. It's been spent. They just don't know what they spent it on. But if they knew what they'd actually and been more efficient, your national debt would be much, much lower. Right. So, the Undersecretary of Defence in 2001, Dov Zakheem, interesting fella.
Oh yeah, incredibly interesting fella.
So let's talk about his history a little bit. From 1984 to 2001, he was the CAO of System Planning Corporation
International, which dealt with the
Yeah.
remote control of systems for airplanes.
Well, they
and
did all
termination
sorts.
systems in case the remote control systems fail.
Exactly. Yeah. They were actually DARPA's biggest contractor for
Okay,
pretty much
that
the
makes
entire
sense.
period.
That makes sense.
And they had just sold this remote control system for planes or for aircraft. So I was thinking, if there's somebody that was in the heart of this, that was sort of a bit of a puppet master, a bit of a, if there was a mastermind for this, this Dov Zakheim is probably
He does fit the bill, doesn't he?
Yeah. He was then, during the 2000 election, Bush Jr.'s foreign policy advisor. He was part of a group they called the Vulcans. I think they were Trekkies.
No,
possibly.
probably not.
It probably means something else. Probably means something very clever that I don't know.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't think you're into Star Trek, to be honest.
But one of the other Vulcans was Condoleezza Rice. And she's also...
She was the one that sat down with the Taliban and negotiated the oil deals, wasn't it?
Yeah,
with
exactly.
The pipelines.
So she's an interesting person as well. So this Dov Zakheim was involved in a tech company, very strongly involved with a technical company, which was involved in DARPA, which designed technology that potentially could have been used
on September the 11th,
on
2001.
September 11th.
Very much so.
I mean, if you're talking about moving these chess pieces around, Dov Zakheim seemed to be very much involved. And then he got a promotion.
Oh, well, he was sworn in as well. There's some other interesting things about him as well. He was one of the authors of the PNAC document, the Project for the New American Century. He was also sworn in as the Pentagon Comptroller, which was the man in charge of the accounts and bookkeeping section of the Pentagon in May 2001, prior to it being impacted by the plane on September the 11th, 2001.
Exactly.
So he was in charge of the investigation into the missing $2.1 trillion.
He was really in charge of trying to fix this problem for then a few years after and never got anywhere, shockingly. Well, they said they did and they do. So let's talk about the New American Century, right? And this white paper called Rebuilding America's Defences. It was written in 1997.
Yes.
A few interesting people were involved in this New American Century, including Donald Rumsfeld himself.
Yep.
This white paper, what was it? What was the nub?
The nub of the white... Well, it was the... it was a project for the New American Century. How does America maintain its world dominance into the
for the next 100 years?
For the next 100 years, into the 21st century.
And Donald Rumsfeld's big plan based from this was this $50 billion worth of investment.
Into the military, yeah.
They argued in this white paper, though, that they would never get public support for that. That was actually argued in the paper written in 1997. And they said... The one thing, and Donald Rumsfeld has actually been quoted as saying this before September 11th as well, that to get this public support behind this, we needed...
some kind of catalysing event, like a new Pearl Harbor.
Which is a lovely way of putting it.
That's an exact quote from the document.
Yeah, that is in the document. So, what we have to ask is, when they released this paper, was a plan hatched?
I think the plan might go back further than the document. I think the document was almost them going, this is what we're about to do.
Yeah, well, it took them 4 years after this to actually implement. So I almost think like a...
It could have been. It
could
could have been
a floating the idea
stages.
out.
Yeah.
Almost like have a look at this. What do you think? And the people that then come back and go, well, yeah, they're maybe the ones that you then have a quiet word with around the corner and go, well, you know what, actually, something could happen. Mr. Silverstein, would you like to buy a building and make a lot of money? And, this is maybe how these things started to just floating the idea out there, But this idea of a new Pearl Harbor event...
And it's not like America's
chilling,
history's, never had any false flag operations in it before.
No.
Not that we might have covered in another episode that their history's littered with them.
Please go back and look at our false flag episode, because I don't care what you say, September 11th was either planned or completely taken advantage of by the American government.
Yeah.
They either planned it and executed it, or when it happened, they went, right, we're taking advantage of this, and they took full advantage.
I'd argue it was a combination of maybe a bit of both, probably. Yeah. But yeah, it's...
I actually don't think Dov Zakheim was particularly happy with the American government, though, after this. He then wrote a book several years later, and he basically argued that the Afghanistan and Iraq war were completely mismanaged, and they did not take advantage of the situation well enough. It smacks as me as a man that had a plan.
That had a plan and they didn't follow it.
And they didn't follow it through. And then was angry.
Angry because he had a better plan. But that's why I find it also very interesting when Bush comes out on the television and said, well, we didn't imagine people flying planes into buildings.
Yeah.
But you
We
did,
never
because
planned for that.
you planned it 50 years ago.
You were
The
actually
American
running-
government were planning an operation to do exactly that and blame it on the Cubans 50 years ago. If you couldn't see that could be done again today, you shouldn't be running a country.
And it's not true anyway, because simulations were being run that very day out of NORAD.
So why would Bush say that? Unless it's to try and hide behind this negligence.
It's a double bluff, isn't it?
It's hiding behind negligence when actually you're complicit.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we've argued the whole way, that we know they were either involved or completely negligent, because we know between them, the FBI and the CIA knew pretty much the whole plan. They knew the terrorists were getting flight simulations and things. They knew about a lot of the money that was being moved around. They knew. And that is not conspiracy theory, that is fact.
And then we haven't even touched on the Able Danger terrorist tracking program that identified Mohammed Atta as the ringleader as early as May 2000.
Yeah, but
and
that
the
technology
American
was
government
illegal.
Destroyed over 10 terabytes of data that the Able Danger terrorist tracking program had identified.
Right. You should be more
Potential
afraid of that,
terrorists.
though, because the Able Danger tracking system, the reason why they destroyed that technology was because the technology was illegal. They were taking information illegally.
Which I do get, and that isn't...
It was illegal before September 11. It's not illegal now.
No.
So
That's what the NSA is now doing, isn't it, in America?
don't write anything in your emails that says anything about anything
Think that you don't want anybody else to read.
because because if it sets off flags, I guarantee we are now on an NSA watch list.
Well, no, we'll be on GCHQs probably, but
I know we'll be on both because they've got that
probably the NSA
agreement.
because they probably share information.
They've got this triple tick sharing system that it's us, Canada, South Africa, and Australia randomly have this agreement, and America's kicking off us at the moment because we want to have Hawaii, Huawei, the telephone people involved in our 5G, and because of that, America are going, well, I'm not sure we can continue to share information with you the same way, but we have an intelligence agreement with those. I just find it random that we share so much information with Australia.
There's not many people, you know. To be fair, you know, it's all the it's another English speaking. It's another it's another country that the whites have invaded and occupied.
Also, Canada. How amazing is Canada's spy network? I mean, can you tell us your secrets, eh? You know that's not really going to work, is it? The most polite
Probably
people.
not.
Excuse me, eh? Can I have a look in your briefcase, please, eh? It's not going to work, is it? They're too polite. Can you imagine James Bond if he was Canadian? It just wouldn't work.
Anyway, it's not really worth sharing information with the Americans because we end up with a deficit.
There's also another amazing piece of when I was doing this research. I remember the Enron scandal. That they basically came out and said that they'd made 111 billion worth of profits, and then it very quickly came out and went, no, you didn't. And they had they invented this way of sort of doing their accounting, and it was completely illegal, and they were overinflating their profits so they could increase their stock market price and then, in theory, make the profits they pretended that they were making. So, at the time of the Enron scandal, Thomas White was the CEO. He then went on to become Secretary of the Army. So he was CEO of a company that had committed one of the biggest
accounting
crimes
frauds
ever.
in the history, in recorded history.
Yeah. And he was then somehow made Secretary of the Army in a time when the Army and Navy thing were trying to figure out how a massive, which any other company would be fraud, how they were trying to figure out how they'd lost 2.3 trillion. How did that guy get that job? What was that job interview like? Do you know what I mean? It's just like, have you got any history in fraud?
You know that thing you did at Enron? Yeah.
Can you do it
Can you
again,
do it again, please? Yeah.
We want to dial that shit up to 12, though.
Yeah.
Crack on.
Enron was a 3, you know.
Yeah, we
want
want
a 12 out of this.
Let's push that up, you know. You with Enron, you had a good try. Now you're in the major leagues, boy. You know, it's
But
like
I'm guessing
ridiculous.
what you're getting to here is the fact that all of the evidence for the ongoing Enron investigation was stored in a building.
Yeah.
Particular building.
Yeah, it was the 7th building, in fact.
Of a World Trade Center complex
Yeah.
that was destroyed on September the 11th, 2001.
The investigation into the 2.3 trillion was definitely hampered by this attack. The investigation into the Enron stopped.
No, but it's almost like he was given that new job position,
Yeah,
and he
right.
went, "I'll do it, but you've got to put all the
Do us
Enron
a-
investigation
do us a
stuff in
favour."
Building 7."
See again, that's the thing.
That is so how that went down. That,
Yeah.
Do you not think? Honest, that is how that
I
went
actually
down.
don't think that is that way. I will help you out the 2.3 trillion, but you've got to help me out. A bit of you rub my back, I'll rub yours.
Yeah, I'll bet.
I'll rub your back, you destroy a building for me. Yeah, okay.
All right.
Actually, we want to destroy that building anyway, so that's nice. That's
We had to tear it down in 5 years anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. I just think there's too many things in this whole story that are just like there's
There's far too many coincidences.
there's too many ducks lined up, isn't there? Do you know what I mean? It's
There's like 50 plus coincidences that all have to align perfectly, and that you're talking probabilities. I've got more chance of winning the lottery. I've got more chance of being struck by lightning than all of those things coinciding.
Yeah.
You really have.
I genuinely think bare minimum. I mean, and I try to be as open-minded as I possible can, and I try to think about both sides of things. But I honestly believe, bare minimum, the FBI and the CIA knew this attack was coming.
Mm-hmm.
They realised we can take advantage of this, and they did. And they sort of went, actually, you know what, though, if Building 7 collapses as well, that would be really nice. And so I think at bare minimum they allowed the attack to happen. Because you cannot argue Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda wouldn't have wanted to do this attack. They wanted to commit a terror attack against American soil. America wasn't popular with these people. It just wasn't. So nobody can argue, well, it was a completely unprovoked attack. It wasn't a completely unprovoked attack. So, if anybody argues that this can't have been done by Osama bin Laden, you're fooling yourself. What we have to argue, though, is when you have a look at how advantageous it was for the Americans, there was so many people in America that was secretly, on September 12th, will go in either, phew, we got away with that, or cha-ching.
Yeah, it's phenomenal, isn't it? I mean, you just the negligence in so many different departments of the American military, government, secret services, intelligence agencies, you name it. There is just a common denominator of negligence across everything. NORAD, like everything, just failed to do what it's supposed to be able to do when it's supposedly the world's leading country, best intelligence agencies, best army, best this, that, the other, but they couldn't stop it from happening. I suspect you're on the money when you said they let it happen in order.
I would actually go as far as saying I think they possibly were involved in the planning.
Yeah, no, I think that as well.
But I would say bare minimum,
yes,
somebody high up decided we're going to let this happen.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of businesses that you need to look into. I mean, we mentioned Marsh & McLennan earlier, didn't we, where WTC1, where the plane hit floor 93 to 100-ish, which is exactly where Marsh & McLennan were. They were overbilling AIG for some Silverstream, for the Silverstream software, for some fictitious hardware that never existed, which they believe was hush money to the tune of about £6 million. For what was going on. Their father and son were, one of them, the father, I think Maurice Greenberg, was the CEO of AIG, and then his son, I forget the son's first name, surname Greenberg, was the CEO of Marsh & McLennan. So it was father and son that were doing this between the insurer and the brokerage. But then we failed to mention as well that there's also Euro Brokers and Cantor Fitzgerald. Euro Brokers and Cantor Fitzgerald are two of the biggest players in the bond market in America.
And
now,
bonds are what
coincidentally,
we're talking about, all this money. When you're talking about big money, you're talking about bonds, aren't you?
So there were $240 billion of securities from the Russian ruble scam that were due on September the 10th, 2001. Now, these would normally have to go through rigorous checking procedures to verify the identity and ownership of these securities before they could be processed through the system and the 240 billion, released, basically.
Another duck lined up.
I believe it was the day after, or maybe two or 3 days after. Or I think it was possibly on September the 14th, 2001. FEMA announced the Emergency Management Act with 5 numbers after it that allowed them to suspend the normal regulatory checking procedures, and the $240 billion were cleared into the American monetary system without the normal checks.
The official reason for that being that they were worried about the economic collapse of...
And the panic from 2 of the major players being taken out in World Trade Center 1 and 2. There's more money involved than just the 2.3 trillion that was missing in the Pentagon's department.
$billion ducks being lined up here that, and September 11 all got knocked out in one go. And 1 would be suspicious, 2 would be 3, 4, 5, 6. It's...
So Silverstein making billions out of the buildings, probably to the tune of 2 to 3 times their actual worth, because he got paid out twice. And they were probably overinsured as well. I'm only surmising there, possibly not, but at least twice.
The Twin Towers
the value
trebled the insurance policy.
So he did triple them.
He insured them for. They were insured for 1.3 billion.
Then he insured them for 3.9
when they privatised these, because obviously the buildings were initially built by the New York Port Authority. He tripled that policy to 3.9 billion. So if you're going to think about this in logically, then right. So you want to do this attack. Silverstein would have to be on it. He got paid.
Yep.
Raytheon maybe supplied the hardware.
Well,
they got paid.
The military-industrial complex defence contractors probably, to some extent, were in on it, but they wouldn't need to know too much.
You might need somebody.
You just need them to manufacture the weapons afterwards to invade and occupy.
No, but what I'm thinking about is if you want somebody to come in and design a device that would take down Building 7, design devices that would, at the very least, weaken to take down. Raytheon would actually be, a prime candidate potentially, and they got paid.
Yeah.
You're talking about Dov Zakheem got a nice job out of this. Bush Jr. had a war that basically cemented his legacy.
Oh, and the fact that the Bush families made millions out of the Carlyle Oil Group, and also out of their interest, as well as who is it in Halliburton, where they then go in and build back up the countries that they've just been in and demolished.
Again, those wars then went on to create, again, billions and trillions of wealth, not necessarily for the country as a whole,
but for individuals that own specific shares in specific companies. So really, there's some companies that need some heavy investigation. I'm trying to think of others as well. Oh, the security firm was quite interesting, wasn't it? Which was Kroll Associates, which was again linked to the Bush family.
Partly owned by Bush Senior.
Who handed over the responsibilities for the security on the Twin Towers to a gentleman, I forget his name, who was the leading expert on Osama bin Laden, who was killed in the attacks on September the 11th, 2001, after starting the security role about a week earlier. So they killed off the main expert on the patsy, or on the guy that they were going to pin it all on, in the event on September the 11th.
Just in case there's one guy that would say, no, that it can't have been him.
Can't have been him, because of X,
I know him.
Because I know this. So he was from the FBI, I forget his name, but he took over security in there, was taken out on September the 11th. In fact, you see a very theme of them. There was a meeting arranged for 9 o'clock on, I don't know, one of the high floor level numbers for a lot of the whistleblowers that wanted to, I think it was from the El Dorado Task Force, which were investigating the $240 billion securities that were due on September the 10th.
The person who was supposed to chair that investigate meeting didn't make it in that day, and he did a telephone conference call from his house instead.
And all of the whistleblowers that attended died, thankfully. 2 or 3 didn't attend and survived, but only through their non-attendance of the meeting.
In traffic, I believe.
That was arranged specifically on that day, probably to eradicate them and their information.
There was supposed to be a meeting regarding the Enron scandal on that day as well.
Oh, really?
That
I didn't know that.
That went badly too. So,
right. Okay. You can't have this many coincidences happening and there not being a plan.
Once there are this many people paid on a day, you've got to start asking questions. There's too many people that did very well out of this, and it's this reverse science? Is this us looking at a situation and what happened and then going, well, it must have been planned then? Or is it
No,
just
but
the fact that it happened? You know what I mean?
It's not though, because the coincidences of having all the whistleblowers in the building, having the main guy that was the world's expert on Bin Laden in one of the Twin Towers when they came,
adds up in it,
you're just placing all of the people that are going to out your plan in one place and killing them. So that,
but you just got to imagine that. I mean, that I know this was an amazing complex and a big building, and a lot of people worked there, but there was a lot of going on in these 3 buildings. There was a lot going on.
Yes.
That had worldwide implications. And then the only other place that it was going on was in the Pentagon that they hit as well. I mean, it really starts to get hard to think that at very least the Commission report was a complete joke.
Farce.
Because they
They
openly say the stock market stuff and the stuff that we can prove
is
no interest, is no relevance. How
come
incompetent
on.
are they?
Henry Kissinger was put in charge of the 9/11 Commission until the victims' families started asking some interesting questions about his interest in the Carlyle Group and other companies connected to it. And then, strangely enough, Kissinger, known for being a cover-up mastermind, then disappeared from the head of the Commission report, because basically I don't think any of the victims' families believed a word he said.
They twigged that maybe we should get... Right, okay, this is going to be bad enough as it is. Let's get Kissinger's name off it.
Yeah,
it's basically the thing.
Yeah, I think that was how that went down.
Right, this already smells of shat. Let's not make it any worse. So, I don't. Oh man, it's just I can't get my head round. Right, we're not even in this episode talking about the laws that were then implemented. Like I said, we talked about
Patriots Act, the removal of our freedoms.
Yeah, we're not even talking about that stuff.
Well, your freedoms, sorry, in America.
Yeah.
We had another incident, 7/7, which was the same kind of event in the UK, so that we could have the same laws or the same freedoms taken from us with new laws that you had, called the Patriots Act. What was ours called?
Oh no, we didn't have sort of one act. Because that's not really how our legal system works.
No,
we
had
have like about 20 different white papers, so they're all individually sort of touched on a different subject.
And then
the
Spain,
Patriot Act was...
Spain did the same after the Madrid bombings as well.
Yeah.
So that changed the Spanish legal system. So now in Spain, America, England,
which then affected the EU.
If your government calls you a terrorist, it can legally detain you for 30 days without trial.
Yeah, because you've got to remember as well, the Spanish thing didn't affect just Spanish law; it affected EU law.
That's true. So Spain was all about the EU, wasn't it? Rather than just Spanish law. But yeah, of course it was. But
which is obviously the world's largest commercial bloc. So controlling the EU in any way, shape or form is... cha-ching. But if you genuinely think the internet is free, it isn't. Following September 11th. It's almost like the internet was coming, and this was, again, another one of those ducks lining up. They had no control, and they wanted to create a reason to implement control. And there's now things like... My messages on WhatsApp are encrypted. The conspiracy theory, or the legitimate theory, is actually that they're not really. They're encrypted as long as you don't have the key. And Zuckerberg has given the American government the key.
Oh,
because it was the only way he was allowed. Yeah, I've never understood why Facebook...
Zuckerberg has meetings with the director of the CIA on a regular basis. Yeah. If you don't think he's involved in like high-level stuff, like I'll think again.
The thing is, Facebook came along... And I don't know why it's that much better than MySpace or any of these other things that are about then. I mean, yeah, it's better, but was it that much? Well, how did it become so popular so fast?
Number of users, I suppose.
But I mean, how? How did so many users get drawn to Facebook? Why were they drawn to that and nothing? How did he get... It's almost like it was decided, okay, we need this software, we've got our backdoors built into it, and we're going to make sure this is the number one... And we're going to cripple.
This will make you a very rich
else.
man, Mark. Oh, great! Yeah. My software. Oh, great!
Oh, thanks very much. He then bought. WhatsApp then did this encrypted messenger service. Nobody liked that, so Facebook bought it. You know what I mean? It's like
and I very much doubt that your WhatsApp messages are any longer encrypted.
I think they are encrypted.
They are. It's just
nobody can read it. Except the American government and
the
whoever
NSA,
sends it
GCHQ, any intelligence agencies, any data gathering agencies.
Probably one of these 3 tick American.
Yeah, there you go. It'd be the triple tick. They'll all have the decryption codes for WhatsApp, so they can read every WhatsApp message that anybody in those countries has ever sent or received.
Because they can't allow us to talk to each other privately.
There's
no way.
There's a congressional hearing that I was listening to where there's a gentleman there that's saying that the CIA have basically openly admitted now that Facebook is the best source of information gathering.
Mm-hmm.
All of our older methods of gathering information pale in insignificance to the amount of information we can obtain from Facebook on individuals immediately.
Yeah, it's not just gathering information, though, is it? It's influencing as well. If you're talking about, in psychology, they call it social constructionism, and it's the science of trying to make sure society and culture goes kind of the way you want it to. There's a lot of money goes into this. Facebook is the tool for use that. You can literally target people individually and try to subtly push them where you want them to go. They think that's possibly how Trump became president. They think it's possibly how the Conservatives won the last thing, and they think it's possibly how we won the Brexit vote. Because
Cambridge Analytica, I assume referring to the company that claimed that it had 5,000 data points on every American citizen prior to the Trump election.
And then they did the same for the Brexit. Mm-hmm. So, and they said that they could influence votes, which in lots of ways is illegal, but because the law hasn't kept up with the internet, it's not illegal through that. It's immoral, it's not illegal.
Yeah.
So
probably a good way of putting it, immoral, not illegal. Yeah.
Mm. So yeah, that's really us talking about the money and the why.
And then, the other thing that I was going to mention that I didn't quite mention was, and of course, the military-industrial complex. Mm-hmm. This whole war on terror that came about in the media.
Yeah. The Cold War had just ended.
Yeah, exactly. So. And
they were sat round desks twiddling their thumbs.
What does the military-industrial complex need to keep making money? Well, it needs to keep manufacturing weapons.
Yeah, needs
so how does it need? What does it need in order to keep manufacturing weapons? An enemy.
Yeah. Well, Raytheon had a load of Tomahawk cruise missiles sat around doing nothing.
Well, yeah, of course. But what I'm trying to say is the war on terror doesn't really exist. You can't have a war on terror because war creates terror. So you're trying to have a war on the consequences of the actions you're involved in. Yeah. It's never ending. It's something that's been thought up by the military-industrial complex in order to keep manufacturing weapons and keep profiteering.
We're talking about a scam of money. This is also a scam of... It's almost like an industrial scam. They've scammed us into believing there's an enemy, that there isn't. And then we then basically created the enemy, because you can argue ISIS didn't exist. And then a few years after September 11th, ISIS appeared.
Well, no. So a few years after Bin Laden's death, ISIS appeared.
What I'm talking about, it's been 20 years. So 10 years after, ISIS didn't exist. 10 years after, the thing of ISIS becoming sort of famous, or we became a house. Yeah, you're exactly right. They killed off Bin Laden, one threat gone.
Right, but
then ISIS appeared.
They no longer had a war on terror without Bin Laden, because the whole war on terror was based on Osama Bin Laden.
Basically hunting him down. Yeah, he was the figurehead. He was the thing. Yeah.
So after they killed him, how quickly did ISIS suddenly emerge?
You could even argue, actually, as soon as Iraq started to calm down as well. As soon as Iraq started, because for a long time, the fight against Al Qaeda was the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. When they sort of started to win that conflict, then they must have thought, okay, we need a new headline. We'll kill Bin Laden.
No. What it was Saddam Hussein used to keep all the everybody in check, and when we went and took Saddam Hussein out, there was nobody to keep everybody in check anymore. That's why the Americans installed him as a puppet leader, because they knew he'd keep that area in check. Unfortunately, what happens with most of the puppets America installed is they grow very disfond of America over the years, and they eventually revolt against them. Gaddafi being another prime example that wanted to create a gold standard currency for the African nations, that then suddenly was the top of America's hit list because he wasn't prepared to buy or sell oil in the American dollar anymore.
The thing with the Iraq War, though, was that was because of the how just wrong it was, and how many 100,000 innocent civilians were basically murdered in that conflict. That created a lot of anger. So it wasn't Iraqis fighting Americans in Iraq; it was insurgents, people coming in from elsewhere. This was the early start of ISIS being created. You know, America created an enemy. They invaded Afghanistan and Iraq, and you can explain to me why they invaded Afghanistan, because I don't really understand it. Yeah, but that's a side effect, but that's not the reason. At the time they said, you've got Osama Bin Laden,
Oh,
to Al
it
Qaeda.
was all about women's rights. That was what it was about. If you remember the media,
Women's rights.
it was about women's rights in Afghanistan. That's what it was all about.
Like bloody the 40 minutes attack nonsense. At the time,
But women's rights in Saudi Arabia weren't an issue at the same time. But in Afghanistan,
still
big
isn't.
issue.
Oh,
Big issue.
Saudi
Big
Arabia
issue.
sells us oil for
Come
cheap.
on.
So shut up. Don't annoy the Saudi Arabians.
Ah.
It costs me enough to fill my car. Is shut up.
But the Saudis are prepared to buy oil in the dollar and buy or sell oil in the dollar. Predominantly
And
sell it,
I'm
obviously,
hoping
but-
the Saudi royal family buy Manchester United. So we like Saudi Arabians. Give us your money. I want Manchester United to be the champions of the world again.
until they set off a bomb at the
At Old Trafford.
At Old Trafford.
No.
Who knows?
I'm just glad you didn't start badmouthing AIG, who were once a sponsor of Manchester United. So I'm glad we
pretty much
skirted
did.
around that. Yeah, I know you did. I was trying to skirt around it. Glory, glory, Man United.
It's not like AIG have any deep ties to the intelligence community in America,
No.
but
But if you actually think about them, these conflicts since they invaded Afghanistan because they said, "You've got Osama bin Laden. Give him us now, or we'll invade you."
right, which is the
And
stupidest
they
threat
said
ever,
no.
given that Alexander the Great couldn't conquer Afghanistan.
Well, it's also a stupid argument because Osama bin Laden was in Pakistan.
Well, yes.
But also, Osama bin Laden to the Afghan people was like Churchill. He was one of the biggest influencers and one of the war leaders during the conflict against the Russians.
Yes.
So for him, he was a freedom fighter.
He was
weren't
part of
gonna
the
do it.
Mujahideen, as they used to refer to them.
And
wasn't
they
it?
didn't believe he was anything to do with September 11. So they didn't. They said no. Now America could have gone in with special forces, but they didn't. They went in with a massive invasion and tried to control a country that no enemy has ever been able. We couldn't. The French couldn't. The Russians couldn't. And so how the hell did
Afghanistan has never been conquered in recorded history.
we think... No, and we didn't conquer it. Anybody thinks that we did? We didn't.
The terrain...
We just happened to barely hold on to it for a bit.
We held on to a few camps in a few places. That was about it. But
And they got mortar bombed constantly. I've got friends that were in Afghanistan. They were mortared constantly. It's just that they were having to be mortared so far away they weren't very accurate.
See, the reason that no one's ever conquered it is because the terrain is unconquerable, and that's why
you can't take tanks and things into that area. They just
too
don't
mountainous.
work.
It's no.
So, I mean, we did a bloody good try. Mainly because we have things like buster bunkers and things like those bombs that are just completely and drones and stuff. But then we invaded Iraq, and we invaded Iraq basically because we could. They had to invade somebody, so they invaded Iraq. This seems to be the best argument I've ever heard of. And it's all this stuff about they've got weapons of mass destruction.
Complete fabrication.
They didn't.
No evidence. Never seen any evidence of Saddam Hussein having any. Well, apart from the chemical weapons that America sold him after Ronald Reagan's election.
I actually always believed they probably did have the weapons of mass destruction because they had them during the first Iraq War, so why wouldn't they still have them? But I very much doubt they had even the remotest ability to launch them. I've probably seen they still sat in a hole in the desert somewhere.
Even that phrase is just aimed by our media to...
Mass destruction.
Mass destruction. But what, so he's got nuclear bombs? No, he's not got anything nuclear. Well, what's the next worst thing? Mass destruction. Mass destruction by chemical weapons. No one likes chemical weapons, do they?
No,
we'll say he's got that. We'll say he's got that.
But then again, they say, we could hit London in 40 minutes. No, I couldn't. They couldn't even hit Iran. And they're next door. And they had their missiles were no good. So, no, that was a complete lie. But it created an enemy. And then while we're fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan, we've all got an enemy. And the industrial
complex continues manufacturing weapons and making profit.
Making money, cha-ching.
So everybody's happy.
So, but Iraq and Afghanistan starts calming down. So they go, all right, well now we'll kill bin Laden because that'll get some
Brownie
headlines,
points, I suppose.
And then ISIS appear. Who next? ISIS is gone now, and it seems like all of a sudden the Russians are becoming a threat again. Who next? China's still on the slyly a threat.
It's almost like we're in a constant state of paranoia.
Yeah, because there are companies that got to make their money.
But why are we so worried about trying to protect ourselves from these few random mental people in a few random countries? Because that's all they would be if America's foreign policy had been different over the last 70 years.
Our government, though, wants us to hate the Chinese government. They want us to hate the Russian government. They want us to hate terrorists, and we have to label it, right? But because they're bleeding into basic psychology of a human being, right? A small part of me hates you because you're a Liverpool fan. And I can't help myself, I hate him. And if he died tomorrow,
Just because his
a
glory
small part
days are gone now and won't be back
Yeah,
for
whatever.
20 years. He's looking down the barrel the wrong way now, isn't he? And he's
Genuinely.
suddenly gone, oh, fuck, it's on the other shoe.
If you died tomorrow, a part of me would go, ah, one of my best friends is dead. Another part of me go, one less Scouser. It's just like,
Yeah.
it's just...
Yeah,
but
I get that.
I hate the French because they're the closest country to us and they all stink of garlic. I don't like the French. It's part...
I probably wouldn't put that in, to be fair, mate.
I don't really. But I have a point, though. It's called in-group, out-group in psychology. But it's not really true. Because even though there's things, it's not really a hate. Because then if a French person comes up and says hello, you go, hello, and you have a lovely conversation and it's all lovely. Our government, for some reason, wants us to hate large groups, but on an individual basis, people aren't like that.
No.
I don't hate French people. I want to, I just don't. I don't hate, the next town over if their football team beats us. Not really. It's just a bit of competition. On an individual basis, humans aren't like that. So why does our government want us to be?
Well, because it helps them profiteer through war.
That's my point. As a species, we don't really want to go to war, do we? Really?
No.
If we've got enough resources, we don't fight each other. If I've got no water, I'm killing your ass for that water. Don't get me wrong. We're a survival species. But on an individual basis, if we've got enough resources, like we do currently, because we don't let people in Africa have any, then we don't really fight each other. We don't want to fight each other.
No.
But our government wants us to.
So,
September 11th. Does this make you... I know what you're going to say. Does this make you more convinced or less convinced that September 11th was planned
I didn't
purposely
really need
by the
much
American
more
government?
convincing, so I'll go with more convinced, but I was already there, to be honest.
When we started this series, I was pretty convinced this was... I always was suspicious. Every episode we do, I become a little bit more certain.
More certain.
I've always got that healthy doubt. I always try to have a
Yeah,
healthy doubt with
I
any
do
of these
as well.
things. But it's really hard. By the way, I did a brief... we've just done our Pentagon episode, and I did I shared our video on a few different Facebook sites, and I asked a question, what do you guys think? Missile or plane? 3 people said plane. 59 people said missile.
So there you go. That's quite interesting.
And that's still counting, to be fair. That was...
Yeah.
like,
But, 3 people out of 60, that's like, I don't know, 5%, isn't it?
Yeah.
Something in that ballpark.
So 95% of people on a conspiracy-based group, I will give that. It's not really a thing of the population, but intelligent people thinking about a question, and that wasn't me asking, do you think the government planned it, a plane to hit the thing?
You just asked, was it a plane or was it a missile?
Plane, missile. So that was interesting.
That is quite an interesting response.
Anyway, so we've still got to do, because I was having to think about this, we're coming up to the end of the series. We're going to have to start thinking about what we want to do in the next series. So if you've got any ideas, please leave a comment. We've had a few really good comments. I asked this question a couple of days ago, and we've had a few good buttes. But that's us. That's Follow the Money. Please like and subscribe to the video, and we'll see you next time.
See you next week.